Most people will never be free, not because of their circumstances, not because of their past, not because the world is unfair, though sometimes it is. They will never be free because every single morning, before they've said a single word, before they've made a single choice, they've already surrendered to noise, to habit, to whoever gets to them first. And they spend the rest of the day wondering why they feel like they're losing a war they never agreed to fight. This video is about that war and how to win it. Here's what an ordinary morning looks like for most people. The alarm goes off. Before the eyes are fully open, the hand is already reaching for the phone, not consciously, like a twitch, like a trained response. And within 60 seconds, someone else's emergency is now your emergency. Someone else's opinion is now living rent-free inside your skull. Someone else's outrage, someone else's news cycle, someone else's perfectly engineered piece of content designed specifically to make you feel behind, afraid, or angry is now the first experience your brain has processed. And you call this starting your day. The Stoics had a different word for it. They called it sleepwalking. Now, I want you to sit with something for a moment, because this is not a small thing. Your brain, from the moment you wake up, is in one of the most neurologically significant states it will be in all day. Researchers studying sleep-to-wake transitions have found that the brain doesn't snap immediately into full waking consciousness. It passes through a gradient from deep sleep through theta wave activity into a slow alpha state. And in that alpha state, your critical filtering system, the part of your mind that evaluates, resists, and questions incoming information, is running at its lowest capacity. In plain language, your brain is wide open. Whatever enters in that window doesn't just pass through. It lands. It sticks. It shapes the neurological tone of your entire day, your mood, your threat response, your motivation levels, your ability to concentrate for hours afterward. Most people hand that window to their phone, and then they wonder why they feel scattered by 10 a.m. This is not a willpower problem. This is not a discipline problem. This is an architecture problem. The architecture of your morning is broken, and until you fix it, everything else, the goals, the habits, the ambitions, is being built on sand. 2,000 years ago, the most powerful man on earth understood this. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of the largest military force in the ancient world, a man who held more institutional power than any human being alive, woke up every morning and fought the same war. Not against barbarians, not against political enemies, against himself. In his private journals, words he never intended anyone to read, he wrote this: "At dawn, when you rise reluctantly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being." Read that slowly. The most powerful man on earth had to remind himself to get out of bed, had to argue with himself, had to philosophically justify the basic act of rising. Why? Because Marcus Aurelius understood something that most people today have forgotten entirely. The morning is not a gentle beginning. It is a negotiation between two forces that live inside every human being. The first force is inertia, the gravitational pull of comfort, habit, old identity. It whispers, "Stay, rest, you've already done enough. It can wait, you are fine as you are." The second force is what the Stoics called virtue, the part of you that knows you were built for something more demanding than ease, the part that knows the unexamined life leads nowhere worth going, the part that has seen, briefly, in your best moments, what you're actually capable of. Every morning, these two forces collide inside you, and whichever one you feed first wins the day. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. Here's what's actually happening in your brain during this negotiation, because I want you to understand this precisely, not as philosophy, but as biology. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, value-based decision-making, and emotional regulation, requires a specific set of conditions to function at full capacity. It needs adequate glucose. It needs low cortisol. And critically, it needs to be activated before the reactive, stimulus-driven parts of your brain take over. When you wake up and immediately expose yourself to high-stimulation content, social media, news, notifications, you trigger the amygdala first. The amygdala is your brain's threat detection system. It's fast, automatic, and ancient. It was designed to respond to predators, not push notifications. But it doesn't know the difference. The moment the amygdala fires, cortisol begins releasing. Your nervous system shifts toward a mild fight-or-flight state. And here's the critical part. Once the amygdala dominates, the prefrontal cortex goes partially offline. The exact faculty you need to make clear, values-driven decisions is suppressed by the act of reaching for your phone. Researchers studying what they call ego depletion, the depletion of your mental and volitional resources across the day, have found that decision quality degrades as the day progresses. The morning is your cognitive peak, your window of maximum clarity, maximum self-regulation, maximum capacity for deliberate choice. And most people spend it on autopilot. Epictetus, born a slave, who rose through pure philosophical discipline to become one of the most influential minds in human history, said this: first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Notice the sequence: identity before action, declaration before behavior, who you are before what you do. This isn't motivational language. This is a neurological prescription, because the research on implementation intentions, a concept developed by psychologist Peter Gallwitzer, shows that when people specify who they intend to be in a given context, before that context arrives, follow-through rates increase by up to 300%. Stating your identity is not soft. It is one of the most evidence-based behavioral interventions that exists. What I'm going to give you now are not affirmations. They are not mantras in the popular sense. They are 7 philosophical positions, each one grounded in Stoic thought and supported by modern psychology, that, practiced daily, begin to rebuild the architecture of how you respond to the world. Think of each one as a load-bearing wall. Remove any one of them, and the structure weakens. Hold all 7, and you become, over time, genuinely difficult to destabilize. Let's go through them one by one. Take your time with each. These are not meant to be consumed quickly. I am the author of my reactions. Nothing outside me has power unless I grant it. This is a radical claim, and I want to be clear about what it does and does not mean. It does not mean your feelings are wrong. It does not mean you should be cold or unmoved. Marcus Aurelius wept when his children died. Seneca grieved publicly. Epictetus lived in chains and still felt the full weight of that condition. The Stoics were not robots. They were not teaching suppression. They were teaching something more precise. The distinction between what the Greeks called the fantasia the impression, the raw event, and the syncatathesis, the assent, what you decide that event means and requires of you. An event happens. Someone insults you. Someone fails you. Something goes wrong. That event is real. Your initial emotional response is automatic and human. But what happens next? Whether you escalate or de-escalate, whether you ruminate or release, whether you react from impulse or respond from character, that is authored by you. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and built an entire school of psychology from that experience, articulated the same principle. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Frankl didn't learn this from a self-help book. He learned it in conditions of absolute horror. And he concluded the same thing Epictetus concluded 2,000 years earlier from inside Roman slavery. The inner life is the last and most important domain of human sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius prepared for this every morning. He wrote to himself, "Today I will meet with meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly people." This is not pessimism. This is premeditation. He was preloading his response before the stimulus arrived, so that when it did, he had already decided who he would be. This is what modern psychology calls proactive coping. Anticipating challenges before they occur reduces their emotional impact when they do, not because they hurt less, but because the brain doesn't register them as surprises. And surprises are what trigger reactive, regrettable behavior. Practice. This morning, name one person or situation that reliably triggers you. Hold it clearly in your mind, then say this line, slowly, deliberately, and ask, if this happens today, who do I choose to be? I will guard my attention as my most finite resource. We speak often about time as the scarcest thing we have, but the Stoics understood something more subtle. Time without attention is worthless. What you are paying attention to is your life, not in a poetic sense, but in a literal one. Your experience of being alive is nothing more or less than the sum of what you have directed your attention toward. Seneca, writing 2,000 years before smartphones, identified distraction as the primary cause of what he called a vita brevis, a short life, not short in years, but short in depth. He wrote, "It is not that we have so little time, but that we waste so much of it." He was disturbed by the distractions of ancient Rome, the noise of the city, the gossip of the forum, the endless social obligations that consumed hours without producing anything of value. If Seneca were alive today and opened an average person's screen time report, 4 to 7 hours of daily phone use, fragmented across hundreds of micro-sessions, he would consider it a civilizational emergency. And he would not be wrong. Here is the mechanism, because I want you to understand what's actually happening. Attention is not neutral. It is formative. Every time you direct your attention somewhere, you are not just noticing something. You are reinforcing a neural pathway. You are making it more likely that your attention will go there again. Habits of attention, just like habits of behavior, are carved into the brain through repetition. Marcus Aurelius described this with striking clarity. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. This is not philosophy as poetry. This is neuroscience as philosophy. What you repeatedly attend to becomes the color of your inner life. Attend to outrage and your nervous system calibrates toward threat. Attend to gossip and your mind becomes pettier. Attend to shallow stimulation repeatedly, and your capacity for deep focus, which neuroscientists call sustained attentional control, actually atrophies like a muscle you stop using. The attention economy, the system built by social media companies to maximize the time your eyes spend on their platforms, understands this better than most people do. The engineers building your feed know that captured attention is the most valuable thing in the world. They know about the alpha wave morning window. They've designed their products to reach you in it. This is not a conspiracy, it is economics. But the effect is the same. Your most neurologically valuable hours spent building someone else's engagement metrics. The Stoic response is not to destroy your phone. It is to activate your hegemonicon, the ruling faculty, the part of you that can choose, before anyone else gets access to it. Practice. For the next 7 days, do not touch your phone for the first 20 minutes after waking. Use that window for something that requires you, not a feed that requires your attention, a page of writing, a moment of stillness, one clear thought about what matters today. Guard the gate before the siege begins. I choose voluntary difficulty. I am not made for ease. I am made for excellence. This is the line most people resist because it asks something unusual. Not that you endure hardship when it arrives. Most people can manage that, but that you actively seek it out before it has to find you. The Stoics called this ascesis, deliberate training, the practice of choosing conditions harder than necessary in order to expand what you consider bearable. Seneca practiced it regularly. Despite being one of the wealthiest men in Rome, he would periodically eat the cheapest food, wear rough clothing, sleep without comfort, not as punishment, but as rehearsal. He called it contubernium pauperis, companionship with poverty. And he asked himself each time, is this the condition I feared? He was calibrating his fear response to reality, proving, repeatedly, that he could handle more than comfort had taught him to believe. Here is the psychological principle underneath this. Every time you avoid discomfort, you increase your sensitivity to it. Every time you quit when things get hard, you reinforce quitting as your default response. The brain is predictive. It models future experiences based on past ones. A brain that has repeatedly chosen ease will predict discomfort as a threat and generate anxiety proportionally. A brain that has repeatedly chosen difficulty predicts it as something manageable, as something familiar, as something survivable. This is the neuroscience of resilience. It is built not by facing one big crisis with courage, but by accumulating thousands of small voluntary acts of choosing the harder path when the easier one was available. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, in his journal where no one could see, catching himself wanting to stay in bed. Are you unwilling to do the work of a human being? The Emperor of Rome, still fighting the same small battle every morning, against comfort, against the whisper that says, not today. The difference between him and most people is not that the whisper was quieter. It's that he had trained himself through years of practice to hear it and still get up. Practice. Before noon today, choose one thing that is uncomfortable and do it voluntarily. A cold shower, a difficult email, the workout you've been postponing. One act of chosen difficulty. Small as it seems, you are training your nervous system to associate discomfort with agency. You are making yourself harder to defeat. This moment is enough. I release the past and refuse to fear the future. Psychological research tells us that the human mind is not present for approximately 47% of its waking life. Nearly half your conscious existence is being spent in moments that don't exist, replaying what is already past, simulating what has not yet arrived. The Stoics called these twin thieves regret and anxiety, and they diagnosed them with precision. Regret is attention directed at events that are fixed and unchangeable. Anxiety is attention directed at events that have not yet occurred and may never occur. Both consume real cognitive and emotional resources. Both produce no output of value, and both are habits, meaning they can be untrained. Marcus Aurelius wrote simply, "Confine yourself to the present," not as a spiritual slogan, as a practical instruction. Epictetus, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." The Stoics also practiced memento mori, the deliberate contemplation of death, not as morbidity, but as a tool for presence. When you genuinely hold in mind that this moment will not come again, that this morning is one of a finite number of mornings, the past loses its grip, the future loses its terror, and the present becomes simply enough. Practice 3 breaths. On the first, release something from yesterday. On the second, release a fear about tomorrow. On the third, arrive here, fully, completely, in the only moment that actually exists. My purpose is not comfort, it is contribution. Self-determination theory, one of the most robust frameworks in motivational psychology, developed by researchers Deci and Ryan, identifies 3 core human needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. That last one is often underestimated. Human beings are not wired for isolated self-optimization. We are wired for contribution to something larger than ourselves. The Stoics understood this through their concept of oikeiosis, the natural expansion of care from self to family, to community, to humanity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee," not as moral instruction, as a statement of fact about how human beings are built. The more narrowly you pursue your own comfort, the less you experience genuine fulfillment. The more you orient toward contribution, toward doing your work with full care, toward the people who depend on you, toward something that outlasts the day, the more contentment arrives unbidden. Practice. Name 1 person you are serving today, 1 act you will do with full care, not because it's observed, but because it reflects who you are. Everything I love is borrowed. I will hold it gently. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of loss, not as pessimism, as the cure for taking things for granted. Epictetus taught, when you embrace someone you love, whisper to yourself that this embrace is not permanent, not to fill you with dread, but to fill you with presence, to make the embrace count. The awareness of impermanence is not the enemy of love. It is its deepest amplifier. Marcus Aurelius lost most of his children. He wrote about loss with an equanimity that was not cold. It was earned, cultivated deliberately, through years of holding beautiful things gently, knowing they were lent, not owned. Practice. Name 3 things you love that you have been taking for granted. Go toward them today with more presence than you otherwise would have. I do not just accept my fate. I love it. This is the summit. Amor fati. Love of fate. Not tolerance of fate. Not endurance of fate. Love. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Every obstacle contains the specific material needed to build the specific version of yourself that could not have been built any other way. The failure teaches you humility no success ever could. The loss teaches you a gratitude that comfort never reaches. The hardship builds a strength that ease cannot produce. This is not passivity. This is the most active philosophical stance possible. It says, whatever has happened is now the material I am working with, and I will work with it completely, without reservation, without resentment. Epictetus built one of the most powerful philosophies of freedom in human history. From inside slavery, he did not hate his condition. He used it. He loved what it made him capable of understanding. And he became, from that position of apparent powerlessness, a man so internally free that Roman senators envied him. Ask yourself, what is the hardest thing in your life right now? Not why is it happening to you, but what is it making you capable of? Find that answer. Love the transformation it requires. 7 foundations, 7 positions to hold every morning before the world gets to you. Not as a checklist, not quickly, one at a time, with 30 seconds of full attention on each. Because what you are building is not a mood, it is not a routine, it is a character, a way of being in the world that becomes, through daily repetition, your instinct, your default, your nature. Marcus Aurelius was not born calm. He trained himself to calmness through decades of daily practice. He was still fighting the small morning war until the end of his life. The practice never ends, but the practitioner changes. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Save this video. Come back to it on the mornings you forget. Share it with someone who is still letting the world decide who they are. The battle is not out there. It has always been in here, and it starts every single morning with 5 minutes that most people throw away. Don't throw them away.